has just reminded me of a really important thing that I said yesterday, which turned out to be untrue. I said yesterday that the reflection quiz would be open for 24 hours after I put up the videos. In fact, they've set up slightly differently and it disappeared for a little while today. It's now, yesterday's one is up and available until midnight tomorrow night. I said it because I was just not working it out. I will go through them all and I think I will just set them up for midnight on the Monday following the weekend. And I'll extend it if I don't get the videos up quicker, okay? I just want to assure you that there are, for participation, I am looking at a range of different things. And yeah, I'm going to give you a mark out of 10 for the quizzes because it didn't let me set it up in a way that I couldn't give you a mark, right? Essentially, if I give you a 5, I think that means it's a pass. If I give you a 6, I think it's a credit. If I give you a 7, it's a distinction. If I give you an 8 or a 9, it's a high distinction. I won't give you a 10 because it just makes me feel like I'm not doing my job properly. I have done all of the ones that were submitted before lunchtime today, and everybody but one person got an 8 and the other person got a 9. Okay, because I thought they were awesome. I am not looking for referenced essays. None of them were that. What I am looking for is an honest statement about where you're at. It's a private conversation. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. That's fine. It's not going, they're not weighted marks in that sense. I'm busily scratching in my notebook stuff I observe in the classroom. If you want to have a private conversation that involves actually talking to me with your voice and your face, like about there, much closer than that, and I'll get anxious. That is also participation, right? Public participation, I'm using Go Soapbox. I am purposefully asking you to do that with your student number because that's where I'll really look at quality as opposed to quantity in that sense, okay? And my experience last time around was people made some really insightful observations there. It's good. I will look at what you do in the discussion boards if you want to do it that way. I'm looking at a range of different things. I would be expecting, based on what we've done in the last 24 hours, that there is nobody that I have seen so far who I wouldn't be putting in the distinction range at least for participation for where we're at. I don't want people shouting the place down. Nobody's got sleepy that I've noticed. And actually, given that nobody actually was obviously asleep in that last section that I just finished, that just is a compliment to me. It's making me happy, okay? So, I don't want you to over-egg it. What I'm really saying is participation is an important part of this course because of breadth. You'll be doing your deep dive. I know that's also making some of you anxious, but you've got plenty of opportunity to go deep. Participation is about engaging with the broader materials. If you don't want to engage with the broader materials, don't come the next 2 weekends. Just do your assessment piece now once we get it over the line, and you'll probably have the opportunity to do a deep dive. That'll be great. It'll probably be harder to get at the higher marks for doing that because, but anybody who's been here all weekend and has been doing the stuff now is, sort of got at least a distinction towards, 1/3 of a distinction mark, right? So, it's not been a worthless time. So don't, I said before, if I could do university without assessment, I would. But that's just not how it works. This is what we do. So, the idea is I'm much more interested in you learning something than you getting a letter on your transcript. All right, I want to really move really quickly here. Again, it's not day one, but I'm going to stop putting the days on my slide packs when I prepare. So I want to talk about regulating the internet, and these are the things that we've been talking about over the last couple of days, getting the definitional piece right. So we've spoken a lot about what technology was. I guess we haven't done these different things about what's the difference between the internet and the cloud. For our purposes, cloud can be the internet. Cyberspace too. But I want to move on to these more legal questions towards the end. Who owns and controls the internet? We do want to talk a little bit about how it's used, but we've been doing that. I'm going to flick through those slides because those conversations have been happening. And we've also been talking a little bit about how laws work on the internet. So, who is in charge? Who is in charge of the internet? Go back to it. Who is in charge of the internet? Content creators? Sorry? Service providers? The government? Sorry? The server owners? The root server owners? Potentially? I think actually search engines. Nobody's in charge. Nobody is the boss of the internet. The internet is a connection of very many devices now, not just servers anymore. The internet was ultimately designed to be something that was incapable of falling over if it were attacked. We spoke briefly this morning about initial funding that came through DARPA, which is part of the defense agency in the US, because Cold War's still running, thinking we want to be able to ensure that our communications won't fall if the Russians bomb our telecommunications plants. So again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it now. I would strongly recommend that you have a listen to those WHOIS lectures that I mentioned this morning, which give a really good, brief history of the internet. You can listen to it while you're walking your dog or you're on your train. You'll find it entertaining and provide lots of trivia for after the conversation. So the WHOIS lecture, Genevieve Bell. So it's there are links to BOYER lectures. So if you were to just Google, don't you love it how Google has become a verb? WHOIS lecture, ABC, you'll find their little listen app will let you have it, but it'll give you a history. In fact, I recommend, if you've got the time, it's such a beautiful place to go, putting buds in your ears and going and walking around the Melbourne Museum while you do it. Walk in and have a look at that original computer. So, let's talk about, in particular, what the internet is, what the technical infrastructure is like. It has been designed to be, to the extent it has been designed, I mean, we use those words and we think about it like a single architect, don't we? But it is really the culmination of a whole lot of different protocols and a whole lot of different intelligence. It's a network of networks. And I'm going to close that door for a second. So it basically operates like one network, but it's a network of interconnected and overlapping networks. The technical coordination of the internet itself has grown around some common characteristics. The idea of openness. Access to the infrastructure is available to all. It's independent in a sense of technology, independent in the sense of hardware, independent in the sense, most importantly, of government. It's run by non-profit membership organisations, It is run by independent non-profit organisations that work together with a goal of meeting the needs of everyone. So hopefully Cameron Boardman from AuDA will come and speak to us. He's the CEO of AuDA, so the Australian Domain Association, the Australian not-for-profit that is responsible for Australia's bits of the internet and in particular domain names. Now he is a government appointment ultimately, but AuDA is completely separate from the government. A kind of new version of separation of powers, if you will. So many have the view that self-regulation has been the key to the success of the internet. It hasn't been slowed down
by the regulation that accompanies other forms of infrastructure. So we think now about the internet, that ability to connect one device to another or to many devices as an infrastructure platform now. Lots of discussion these days about what's happening with the NBN, for example. But the NBN is just, the infrastructure actually meets the internet in that sense. So the ecosystem is a better word for it here, is made up of a range of different things. So not the least of which is the technical standards bodies that identify the protocols that allow machines to talk to each other. By independently having open protocols that allow devices to communicate with each other, the internet is ultimately born. What other kinds of things do we have in here? I've got some organisations that manage resources for global naming and addressing. So ICANN is the international body in that regard, but AuDA is the body that is responsible for the .com.au, the net.au, and similar. We also have individual registries. So up until, I want to say about 2007, give or take, I think there'll probably be a slide that tells us shortly, Melbourne IT was both the domain name allocator and a share registry. It listed and basically separated out the domain name registry the domain name allocation and its registry business. So registries just essentially keep the lists. They keep the list of what numbers, what IP addresses are associated with what domain, and ensure that they are kept together. Another thing to really think about in the sense of understanding the ecosystem for the internet is the importance of different users. Almost everybody is connected to the internet these days. There are more email addresses in the universe than there are drinking taps. There is more access to internet connectivity than there is to fresh water. So I'm not going to speak too much about this, but we can unpick, for those of you who are interested, the different kinds of organisations that interact to deliver the internet, the World Wide Web to us. And I think looking at them in this kind of matrix structure helps you understand the differences between the protocols themselves, the IP address numbers, and the names that are allocated, and then who allocates the policy, who has oversight over that, and who actually deals with the implementation. I think it's probably easier to look at it a little bit like this and to just think about what it is that the internet is doing. And really, it's as simple as just traveling between different pieces of information and carrying it back. I'll let you look at that in your own time. It's pretty cute. Lots of terminology here, and it's changing all the time. I'm not really going to spend any time here other than to ask you to, when you're doing your own presentations and your own research, to be as precise as you can about terminology. And if you are finding that as you do your deep dive into a particular area, that you are talking either about particular kinds of technology or particular interfaces, that you make sure that you define them, both for your audience in the room here, but also for me as I'm dealing with your materials. This comes from, I've mentioned a couple of times, Australia's cybersecurity policy, and it gives us some relatively up-to-date information. So this is a bit over a year old, but there's been an update to this policy in the last couple of weeks, and I just didn't get a chance to go and look at the numbers. But effectively, and I don't think there's anything that's predicting that this hasn't come true. It was predicting that 90% of Australians would be connected to the internet by this year. 1 in 2 Australian small businesses receive payments online. By the year after next, the average Australian household will have 24 devices. Now, back in 1968 or so, the head of IBM predicted that there would probably be 5 personal computers in the world. Something like that. Most of us, I have more than 5 computers in my handbag on an average day. The growth of these kind of technologies is ridiculous. The market for connected home devices is expected to grow 11-fold between 2016 and 2019. So the internet is big business. The connection to the internet is big business, and it's become very much part of the infrastructure of modern life. And there are some amazing things that are being done in that space. So, what are the main legal problems that we keep going? No, I'm not going to ask you to do it that way, sorry. Sure, we don't have time. As you think about points, sorry, I was going to remind you about the soapbox, but you can remember as you go. Another report that I think is worth you guys having a look at, this is a drivers of change diagram that comes from it. This is from the Internet Society, who every second year do a report on the state of the internet and what is happening. Now, what I think is really interesting here and might help some of you refine and think about the assignments that you want to do as you're finding an area, is it's looked at both a combination of the drivers of change and the different areas of impact that are affected by it and links them. So it's looking at, for example, the extent to which personal freedoms and rights have been a significant driver of the use of the internet, and the internet itself has, I mean, we've all heard of the Arab Spring, we've all understood what the impact is of political change and political protest, both those we agree with and don't, through Twitter and other devices. But then it's also saying, well, we need to look at those areas of impact and marry them up with these other drivers of change, things like artificial intelligence, things like cyber threats, or network standards, or the internet economy. So there is a link to this report. She says worried because I'm finding that I can't always tell you the truth about what's happening in Canvas, but I will double check it. There were 2 reports that I wanted to bring to your attention. This one and the Deloitte TNT report. I was hoping that you would have had the opportunity to have a look at these before we started these classes. I still think that it's a good idea for you to have a flick through them and see the extent to which they inspire your thinking. Oh, something's gone wrong there. Okay, quickly, and this is the last bit of substance that we want to do, is I just wanted to take you through in a little bit more detail some of these bodies that deal with internet addresses. So ICANN, you would have seen that on one of those earlier slides, is the International Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. It's a non-profit, and it's responsible for the global coordination of the internet's unique identifier and stable operations of its organisation, or it's a safe profit organisation. So domain names ultimately are used to locate organisations online. One of the biggest changes, or one of the biggest things that came with the development of this idea of Web 2.0 was this idea that we didn't need to know anybody's number anymore, that we could associate a number with a unique identifier. So I think it's actually only been in the last 7 or 8 years that domain names could be in characters that weren't Roman characters. So a lot of the internet's early development has had a very Anglo-centric consequence. So I think one of the most recent scripts to be added to the internet is Arabic. And it's quite interesting to see how that impacts the culture of the internet as well. AuDA, as I say, I'm really hoping that Cameron will come and speak to us. I'm just not sure how I'm going to fit in with his timetable. But AuDA is basically responsible for the second level domain names. So again, sorry, I thought I had a slide there. It might have been the blank one that disappeared. Yeah, something's gone wrong. I did have a slide. Oh, here it is. Let's have a look at this just so we understand what I'm talking about: first, second, and third domain. So the kind of counterintuitive when we talk about the top level domain, we're actually talking about the last little bit. So, sorry? Yeah, it's the country code. So the second level domain basically puts us in a particular space, so the com or the edu or whatever. Now, interestingly enough, so the country code or the top level domain, which is the technical word for it, in true American form, they don't have one of those. They just go straight to the .com, the .org, the .net. Sorry?
It makes sense.
Oh yeah, because they're in the middle of the world, that's what they're doing, absolutely. And so some work, so interestingly enough, so we do for example, a .com.au, where the UK have a .co.au. So their second level domain for commercial is co. They don't offer com.uk. Sorry, I said .co.au before, didn't I? I meant to say .co.uk. And then we have this third level domain. So with this particular domain, I've used RMITs, so that's what RMIT does. So when we were using before those soapbox.rmit.edu.au, essentially that tells us that there is a Go Soapbox area, a fourth level, within RMIT's own domain. So interestingly, when you're looking at Canvas, you will see it says www.rmit.instructure, blah, blah, blah. And that immediately tells you that you're now no longer in the RMIT domain, you're in the domain that belongs to somebody called Instructure, who happen to be the owners of the Canvas platform, and you're in the RMIT bit of that. So that's one of the ways that we can use domain names to understand where we're sitting. So sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we understood what that is. So AuDA are responsible for looking after Australia's second level domains. Another important player in this space is WHOIS. Has anybody ever done a little tricky WHOIS search just to see who really is behind that? You might want to go and do a little WHOIS on RMIT as you looked at it, or a WHOIS search on Instructure as you suddenly realise that your rating information is now outside of RMIT if you hadn't thought about that before. And basically WHOIS provides this information. So the Register of Record for the domain name, who the registrant is, who the contact people are, etc. You can pay extra money to hide some of that information. It doesn't provide information about the creation or the expiry dates for domain names, and it doesn't provide contact details for the registrant. uDRP and auDRP are the Uniform Dispute Resolution Policy and then the Policy Administrator respectively. So uDRP was implemented by ICANN back in 1999 and basically came out of some recommendations from the World Intellectual Property Foundation, or organisation I should say, so WIPO. This is because back in 1998, WIPO they undertook an international consultation to develop recommendations concerning the kinds of issues that we've been talking about. So essentially it's a combination of a policy provider and a dispute resolution process. So here we are, just talking about nobody controls the internet. There are these not-for-profit bodies that administer ultimately access to it in terms of domain names, IP addresses, etc. And then they have their own dispute resolution process. Little technical knowledge, DNS. So we talked about denial of service and tax this morning, which is DSAs. The DNS is the domain name system. The domain name system itself stores information about domain names in a distributed electronic format or database. Essentially, devices have what are called IP addresses. You've probably seen them. Series of numbers and dots. And then the domain name system. So interesting there. By the way, IP addresses also follow a pattern. So 4 groups of up to 3 digits. And then the domain name itself is linked to that IP address. I've spoken about this one already. Interestingly enough here, for those of you who actually want to have a look at it, there are cases where we've got judges explaining to us how the internet works. Kind of scary in its own way, but because of the way that the law works here, if the judge has said this is how the internet works, then that's how the law sees the internet working. So unless we can distinguish in a judgment between either statements of fact or whether it's OuDRP, in many cases we have, well actually there aren't that many of them, thank goodness, but we do have analysis as to how the internet works. So, actually I've already spoken about this. Domain names at the end of the day are just easy ways to find a website. And it's only 7 years ago that the first internationalized domain names became available in Arabic and Cyrillic. So, and when you think that 5 out of the 10 most spoken languages in the world are not based on Roman script. It's quite interesting. So, in our death knell, one of the questions that has come up repeatedly in this space is the question of whether people own their domain name. So, is a domain name personal property? And in a nutshell, the policies say no. You don't have a proprietary right in your domain name. You don't own it. Instead, you hold a license to use the name for a specified period of time and under certain terms and conditions. Can you trademark that? In fact, in order to get a name under the Australian rules, you either need to already have a trademark or you need your business name to be the same or substantially similar, or your personal name to be the same or substantially similar. So there might be other ways of protecting the word. Sorry? From being used by or being used in a misleading way. But they're the kind of things, I'm going to rush you though, they're the kinds of issues that these kind of cases that can be done. Now it's kind of interesting here because second level domains can't actually be bought and sold that freely, but once they're actually activated, they're quite easily traded on a secondary market. So to create them in the first place, you need to be able to establish that ownership link, but trading them is actually quite easy. And so we see a reasonable amount of business in that space with the auctioning of different domain names. So in Australia, in order to get a domain name, Australia, and in fact, many would argue that one of the reasons why we don't have the same level of issues that have been seen in other countries, and in particular in the States, with commercial dissatisfaction with the way that domain names are dealt with, is because of the clarity around the rules from the beginning. So in order to get a domain name here, you need to meet the requirements. You need to have that substantial similarity. A couple of slides here, I won't go through the details of them each, but there's really different rules around depending on whether you want a .com or a association, an asn.au or a .org. Interestingly enough, I don't know if any of you have ever come across one of these, this idea of the .id.au domain. So you can only get one if you're an Australian citizen. And so I just want to insert some kind of Constitution, Section 44 joke here. And anyway, I just couldn't think of what one it was, but like it's kind of amusing if you're a constitutional law geek, I'm sure. Domain names must exactly match or be an acronym or an abbreviation of the name that the registrant has. So, if you were, say in the olden days, PricewaterhouseCoopers, you could get the domain name pricewaterhousecoopers.com.au, but everybody's calling you PwC, and in fact I suspect that sometimes firms are changing their names to match their domain name now. Then you are able to establish that you are strongly associated with the initials PwC, and off you go. So everybody understand this idea of typo squatting? You come across that as a concept? So typo squatting is using regular misspellings of the word. So, for example, it's quite a large case in the States a number of years ago. Slightly different context, I'm just having trouble thinking of one off the top of my head, but where there used to be 1-800 and you could spell out the word reverse to do reverse phone call charges. And another telephone operator took the number that was 1-800 reverse spelled slightly incorrectly with some of the letters jumbled up, I can't remember what it was, and to take advantage of people who were trying to do one thing to go to their service instead. And that's what typo squatting is. Basically looking at what somebody else is doing, thinking they've gone to type in Big Mac or Uber or something, and instead they get Uber or some other letters that are close by. So that's quite discouraging in Australia, and there have been so many problems. What do I want to say here? It's worth noting, just going back to your trademark problem, that quite often, because of the rules in Australia, you do need to go through the process of getting a registered trademark in order to get your domain name. And then if you change it slightly, you need to make sure you've got your trademark to match it. So, talking about this idea of property, if they aren't property, can domain names be transferred? I've given you away, I already said earlier, they're freely transferred, that's quite easy. Oh, what's happened there? Don't know why my beautiful slide that was looking so lovely has disappeared. I can't even remember what it was going to say. Something's gone wrong with it. I think I've just got a quote from a case. It's literally black there for me, I can't see. But I think I've got a case around that transferability of the domain name. So I guess the easiest way for commercial lawyers in the room anyway to think about this is think about domain names as a bit like business names. So it's very easy for our clients to think about a business name as a piece of property that they own. It signifies it's their business. Actually, in reality, you can't trade under Australian law under a name that is not your own name unless you've registered a business name. Because people have a right to know who they're doing business with. So I can trade as Catherine Nolan's solicitor without doing anything other than making sure I hold a practicing certificate, right? But actually, my firm name is Nolan Legal. So in order to trade as Nolan Legal, I need to have Nolan Legal registered as a business name. Now, I might think of that as my trademark, I might think of that as some property that belongs to me, but actually it's my obligation to register it. And I think we think about domain names in a similar way. They don't have a proprietary right. We need to register them
and follow the rules in relation to registration in order to be able to trade using them or to hold ourselves out in that domain sense, that there is an obligation to register and to connect ourselves with those names. If we sell our business or transfer it, then we can transfer the name as well, because somebody else will need it for that purpose. One of the issues that often comes up in buying and selling businesses, I'll come back to you in just a second. One of the issues that often comes up is that website names. Websites are better now. They tend to be registered by the business or the business owner instead of just the guy who's looking after IT on the day. That can be quite difficult. One of the things I've seen a lot is people buying and selling businesses where a big part of their marketing is around their Facebook accounts or their Instagram accounts, whatever, and the actual account is registered in the name of whoever it was who set it up on the day, who may not even work at that place anymore. So if I'm buying or selling a business that's, you know, generating thousands of leads for me every day as a consequence of the Instagram pretty, I want to know that my client is going to get access to that account and can continue it. Transferring it and opening a new account is not good. I can't move my followers across. I can't move my leads in that way. Sorry, you wanted to say something.
So if I have a domain that registered,
okay, so good question, very quiet question though. The question is, if I have a name that I've registered overseas, do I have to go through a process of registering and doing it something here? And the short answer is no, because the Australian rules relate to the first level or the top level and second level domains that are governed in Australia. Now, in relation to actually running a business, so yeah, I have, for example, because it's easier, got and cheaper to get nolanlegal.com. I think that's I operated on nolanlegal.com for a long time before I did nolanlegal.com.au. And it was just easier and cheaper to get set up as much as anything else. Still means I have to comply with the laws of Australia in relation to any commerce that I do through my own website. It still means, regardless of whether I'm a .com, a .biz or a .cn, I still need to comply with laws in the places that I do business, and I need to be able to transfer in accordance with those rules. But in each of those places, so in Australia, if I'm going to do business under a name that's not my own, I need a business name. So that's separate from your domain name, for example. Sorry, did I just get long-winded then? A little bit. Come back to me if that doesn't make sense. Okay. Stats that I'm giving you here are really aimed at one thing. The law is pretty clear that domain names are not tangible property, that they're intangibles. The accountants in the room, I think, would agree that when we're allocating revenue or value in relation to a domain, that we would be putting it in the intangibles on the balance sheet. They have enormous value though, absolutely enormous value. And separating out what the value of your domain is from other intellectual property type assets can be quite a difficult thing. So the approach that's taken recognises this idea of a 2-year term. You get a license for 2 years, but the reality is the licenses automatically renew as long as you pay. You know, there's no real question about them. It doesn't confer exclusive rights. Commercial use of a domain name can contravene the rights of another party in the same or a similar name. That doesn't mean it can't be a trademark infringement. So people can have very similar names, but as far as the domain name situation is, there's no issue with AuDA. They can register 2 names quite happily. That just because you can register the name doesn't mean that you won't be infringing somebody else's trademark. Okay, I am really at risk of running out of time. Just let me have a quick look here so I can say, oh no, actually we might get there. Now, from time to time, AuDA will be convinced by its policies to require the transfer of certain domains to other people. So under the uDRP process, somebody had registered the words iPod.com, another GoDaddy, which I think is kind of funny that they didn't, that they're a domain name registered themselves, that they didn't actually protect all the typo squatting that they could have, or Sony Z5. All of these were names that were registered by other people, but the disputes process said, no, these are just too similar to names that are value of other people and require the transfer back. In Australia, we've seen TelstraOnline.com, Holden Astra, Tina Arena, Napoleon Purtis, Sandisk, and the only one that actually has a case, I think, that's easy to find is the unimelbourne.com.au, which was basically registered by the student union and required to be transferred back. This brings us to what are universally referred to as the sucks cases. Again, we don't have so many sucks cases here because it's very hard in Australia under the AuDA rules to get a name that isn't closely related to your actual name. But the cases look at things like, in particular, www.walmartsucks.com. So the extent to which competitors or disgruntled customers have a right to register and use a domain, and can a domain itself be defamatory, particularly when people who are typing something in Google are then coming up with the end result. Though I must admit, I do wonder about, anybody ever look at People of Walmart? People of Walmart is a very amusing Instagram page where people just put photos of people they see in Walmart. It's not nice. It shows I'm not a nice person. Oh, sorry, again, something's happened with my slides. They're all messy. I don't like it when they're messy. That's overlap. So this is often referred to as cyber griping. So I like the sucks cases though. Some recent-ish developments. Recent-ish. We're seeing now more the ability for a top-level domain that is a brand. So, .amazon, .google, .toyota. They've, so in February 2012, between January and May 2012, large corporations were able to bid with ICANN for a top-level domain that was essentially their brand. What else here? And perhaps some movement in the direction of seeing domain names as personal property. There has been one case in Canada where that has happened. So that was a bit of a rush job there. There are lots of different ideas that I wanted to expose you to, moving through them very quickly. Happy to have separate conversations or to have a discussion online as we go. But it is 13 minutes to 5. I didn't want us to finish on time. I'm happy to stay around and chat if anybody wants to. So on that note, any questions, comments you'd like to make at the end of the day?